Welcome back to episode 2 of rStudies called Good Grief. Once again, I'm sitting with Pastor Marty, who I think is an expert in these realms. They say it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert of something, and I think you've surpassed that in walking with people through grief and loss a long time ago. And so I have loved listening to your heart and wisdom through this. And I can't wait to dive in more because I think we just scratched the surface last time, right? 5 stages of grief. Deep love often leads to deep grief. What is grief and loss? That's almost the basics, right? Yeah. But then it starts to there's a personal aspect. And I know you believe this because we've talked about it before, that if you experience grief, you've experienced that grief. That every grief is different. Yes. Right? Yeah. You lose a pet. It's going to be different for you than someone else. Because their pet may have been outside and they never made an emotional bond to it, right? Right. And so the grieving those two things will still need grief, but they'll be different. And so I'm excited to talk to you, Marty, about some personal parts of grief and loss. And I think they'll be really helpful to those who engage. One of the things I wanted to ask is a question that I've found myself asking, and I've heard it many times, is how long? How long is this grief or sense of loss gonna last? Yeah. You know, and I think we love to just have a beginning and end of things. Yes. So probably as a pastor, we would love to be able to say, hey, 8 weeks, you'll be great. That's right. I'm guessing you're not going to tell us that's the answer. No. So how long, man?
Yeah, and
we're counting on you here. Yeah. How long?
Okay, man, no pressure, right?
None, 0.
Well, before answering that, I think it's good to recognize, why do we ask that question? How long? And I think because there's times when grief, it feels so unbearable, right? Yes. Or that we're just so weary of it. We just want to be done with it.
I think the hardest part is it feels like it never has an end.
Yes. And we can be drowning in grief and stuck in it, and we want closure. And I know I shared before that was the case with my dad. There was a point, 10 years, I want to be done with it. Yeah. And my spiritual director and good friend, Pat, he's like, sorry. I think, though, the hope in it is that it does get better. That there is good in our grief. Again, as we take it to God, as we take it to other people, as we get honest with ourselves about it, that there really is good grief, and that we want to let that grief do its good work in us. And so that God does have grace for us, and there is growth for it. So I think that's what gives me hope in the midst of the hard of it. Do I have to keep working at this? Yes, you do. And I think also, knowing that, hey, hard things are good, right? The best things in life often come out of hard things. Yeah. And good things are hard. And we just have to embrace that. That's hard to embrace it because we want comfort, right? Yes. We want closure. We want to say, okay, we're done with that. But grief is a journey. Loss is a journey. But there is meaning, there is intention, and there's purpose behind it. And so I think when we recognize that and we see that God's behind all of it, even if we don't like it, and even if we don't like how God is necessarily walking alongside of us or other people, that we can hold on to the fact that I'm going to be okay. I really am. Yeah. It doesn't define me, right? It doesn't have to control me, and it's not going to destroy me. And so I'm not alone in it. Yeah. So that's...
I think we can often feel like I became a Christian for the mountaintop, not the valley. Yeah. And what you just said, and tell me, this is what I heard, is that there's good in the valley. Yeah. And that God is in the valley. Yeah. Man, when we're in one of those 5 stages you described, that's hard to hear.
It is.
That's hard to hear.
Yeah.
One of the other hard things that I think happens in grief, and maybe you can help us with how to handle it, is if you're married or you have a significant other, a partner, a close friend, and you grieve so differently. One is a crier, one's not. One can grieve 4 weeks, the other can grieve 12.
Yeah.
How do we understand that? Why, we're both married, why don't our spouses grieve like us?
Yeah.
Or vice versa?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I would say, starting with it, is that our grief can be as unique as each person is unique. Right? So God has created each of us fearfully and wonderfully and so diverse. We see all of God's creation as diverse, all of God's people are diverse. And so that's one part of it. We're just different. So grief's going to hit us differently, and we're going to respond to it differently. And then the other side of it is we're all in a different place in our spiritual journey, right?
Yeah. Even within our own home.
Even within our own home. And there's sometimes when I know for my wife and I, for Kathy and I, there's times when we're like, oh yeah, we're in rhythm, we're in the same. And there's other times like, nope, you're further than me and I'm back here, you know, and it switches. And so that's going to play into it.
It does switch?
Yeah.
I always feel like I'm back here. I always feel like she's got it going on with the God thing, man.
Yeah, that may be for you. I don't know.
Because we're married so well, I think.
I might say she's usually more out there.
Yeah, I know your wife.
Yeah, you do. And so I think that's just understanding that. But also the pull is, because we so want to not be alone in our grief.
Yes.
That we want others to be exactly where we're at. Yeah. Right? And then that can cause the tension. And we know the stories, and the stories break our heart to hear about, and I can't imagine it. I have 4 boys I love so deeply. I can't imagine losing one of them. And I can't imagine what would happen as Kathy and I tried to grieve that together. Grieving it individually and together. But we know that oftentimes when a loss of a child, that sometimes the marriage just doesn't make it.
Yes, that happens all the time.
It happens too much, right?
Yeah.
And it grieves our heart on that. And a lot of it has to do with not giving each other space to be able to grieve in different ways. And not also reaching out to God and other people to help you navigate that grief.
Right.
And to be able to, one of the best ways for people to navigate that grief is to find someone else who has gone through the same thing. Yeah. And then they can share out of their own experience. Yeah, we felt that too. Yeah. And so we got to be careful not to try to impose on the other person, like, you need to be where I'm at. Yeah. Now we can help the other person understand where we're at, and then also open our hearts to the other person. Well, where are you at with this? Yeah. And so I think those things can be helpful to keep that in mind.
I think you said something in there that I want to make sure the audience doesn't miss. Your grief can be as unique as you are.
Absolutely.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
That even in marriage, or we're about to talk about children, and how we work through it with them, that if we can step back and see the person, we're going to say that's how they grieve, and that's how they need to grieve, and that's the way they need to grieve, and it's okay that it's totally different than me.
Yeah.
Because I find tension around, like when I move on and the person doesn't.
Yes, that's a huge one.
Like we've been wounded the same way.
Right.
But I'm
I'm
stage 5.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm acceptance.
Yeah.
I got mad yesterday. I went into, I bargained. I got into the depression quick in the morning. Yeah. And then I'm on.
Yeah.
And this person's back here like, I still don't believe it happened.
Yeah.
How
and you're like, come on.
Yeah. How you in denial?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's unique because of how they're made.
Yeah.
And that is really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. That's a good insight too, because pace has a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
Too.
So many of us watching have children of all kinds of ages, right? Middle school, high school, adult children. And I think it's one thing to grieve with a spouse or a loved one. But then you've got these people that are little and some of their worldview isn't fully shaped yet.
Yeah.
They're trying to figure out the loss of grandma.
Yeah.
A parent, God forbid.
Yeah.
Friendships, often when lost, the children experience it because they're not together anymore.
Yeah.
Relationships that they have at school.
Yeah.
How do we help our kids understand grief and grieve themselves?
Yeah.
That seems difficult to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's one aspect of it I think is more intuitive. I think the more, and this isn't just with children, this would be with everybody, but this comes to my mind as you're sharing that, my heart, is the more comfortable we get with our own grief and loss and take that journey, the better able that we are to walk with others in it. Because oftentimes, some of the ways we don't go about walking alongside people in grief very well, especially with our children, is because we don't want to stir up our own grief, because we're not comfortable to lean into our own grief. And so that's a little bit of a side, but I think it really is important to know that, because when you're doing that good work and that hard work of grief, that it is going to help you walk alongside everybody. But
do you think,
yeah,
this pricks something in my mind. I've heard adults share, hey, in my house, we never talked about anything.
Yeah.
You ever heard that?
Yeah.
We never talked about anything, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that's because the parents weren't comfortable talking about anything?
Yeah. Yeah. And some of that has to do with that's kind of what they saw in their own. Like, we don't talk about that stuff. Right?
Yeah.
You know?
This is what we do.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. It wasn't modeled for me, so I don't know how to do it for my kids.
Yeah.
And those stuff that passed down from generations. Yeah. But we can break through that and recognize, again, that grief can be good and that we got to pay attention to it, especially as we love our kids in it. And also as a parent, this comes in, right? Always that balance of, like, I know if I overprotect my kids, it's not good for them, right?
Yeah.
Like, it cuts their knees out in front of them.
Right.
But if I underprotect them and they get too wounded by life, then that's not good for them either. And so how do I navigate that tension of how much giving opportunity to let them understand grief, to talk about their grief, and then for us to speak into it? Or more so, maybe first sit in it with them, hold it.
Yeah.
And one of the best things to do with children or anybody is, as you hear the angst, the anger, the grief, and recognize how hard it is for them right now, is just to say that.
Yeah.
That sounds like really hard. And if it's breaking your heart, say that. Man, that breaks my heart. Or that angers me too. That saddens me too. I don't know why God allowed that to happen. So being honest and recognizing, again, like I said, sometimes there's not words, right? Sometimes there's not answers.
Right.
There's not good words, there's not good answers. So being honest with our kids about that. I found, like, more honest that I am in those, like they're drawn to that. They're like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But hey, together, we're going to walk this journey. We're going to see, are there some answers here? You know, what can God reveal to us in this? And then how do I handle that grief?
Yeah.
I think it's important as men that generations past, it was like, to be tough and to be strong, right?
Yeah.
You don't show your emotions.
Pull up your bootstraps.
Right.
Yeah.
And man, when I look at Jesus, I don't see that. There's times to do that, right?
Yeah.
But there's times then also to be weak and to open up. And so I want my boys to see that grief affects me. Their grief affects me. My own grief affects me.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm mad. Sometimes I'm sad about it. Sometimes I cry about it. Sometimes I'm like, oh!
Yeah.
Makes me so mad.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm going to ask you a follow-up question to that. And maybe this is how we'll conclude this episode, because I think a question arises in me is there ever a time or a situation to not share a loss with your child? Would there ever be something that would happen in the family, at your work, in the culture, that you would say, hey, there is a time to not discuss that loss. The children aren't ready for it. It's too hard.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're not ready for it, so wait till you are.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because I know me and my wife have had discussions of like, man, it's, social issues, things like that. Do we share that with our children yet?
Yeah.
Are they ready for that?
Yeah.
Because it's going to create loss for them or grief for them.
Yes, yes. I'm so glad you asked that, because absolutely. And I think that's important that we talk about it with God and with one another, and understanding where are our children at? What ages are they? Where are they at in their spiritual journey? What's the nature of the loss? Mm-hmm. And I love that you said not only are they ready for it, but am I ready for it?
Right.
And then, so I think, yes, absolutely. I think for now, yeah, that's probably not something. And then bring it back up later down the road. Ask the Holy Spirit to, when we need to talk about this with them, that you would stir our hearts to that, and then we get to that place. So yes, absolutely on that side of it, we want to, and that'd be the side we really want to protect them. We want to shepherd them in that way. And God's given us that responsibility and that privilege to do that. And there's a time to do that. And then as they grow, as they mature, lean into that. I know, though, I've heard a lot of stories. So this is not a but it's an and. And we can so easily not share those hard things in our family and keep secrets. And man, it messed up a lot of my family in doing that. And God's done some good work that I'm recognizing, I want to be honest about those things. I don't want to keep secrets.
Yeah.
Especially long term.
Right.
They need to know that this is part of their family history. They need to know the good, they need to know the bad, they need to know the ugly.
Yeah.
In that. But coming back to what you said, yes, be prayerful, talk it through, recognize that they're ready for some, but they're not ready for all of it.
Yeah. I had a pastor friend one time share there is appropriate transparency in all different kinds of contexts.
Yes.
And I think
That's a
with
good
our
way
children,
Yeah.
it can just be, man, we really got to be careful.
Yeah.
Especially if it's personal in nature.
Yes.
Relationships,
Yeah.
things like that, not just loss. Obviously, loss kind of gets kicked in because of funerals and memorials. Like you gotta talk about it. But relational context is tough. Divorce, things like that. When is the right time?
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes a lot of wisdom, huh?
It does, and I've seen it play out, as you mentioned, funerals. I've seen that with parents go, do we have them come to the funeral? There's sometimes one of the kids doesn't want to.
Yeah.
And so you have to lean into that. Is that going to be good or bad for them?
Right.
And there's not an easy answer for that in prayer, and and how much are they a part of it, and do they view the bot, those kind of things. So it gets nitty gritty with that. Yeah.
I feel so encouraged in this episode, Marty, and I want to highlight one thing particularly for us. Continues to just resonate in my mind because we're talking about good grief, right?
Yeah.
And there's a conflict there, right?
Yeah.
But how we handle it is so important.
Yeah.
That's what can make it good. That's what can make the valley good. That's what makes God good. And I think the huge identity piece that you share with us today is we uniquely grieve based on who we uniquely are. That who you are as a person will impact so much of how you grieve and how you feel and how long you process and how long each stage lasts.
Yeah.
I think you freed some people today.
Oh, I hope so.
To just be able to say,
Yeah.
I am who I am.
Yeah.
And that's why I grieve how and when and each one of the stages, how long they last.
Yeah.
So I hope that was helpful to you. I can't wait. We've got a few more things to unpack in our final episode. I can't wait to get your thoughts on them. Thank you, Marty.
Yeah, you're welcome.